Hi, welcome back to Little Victories, the video game podcast where we celebrate every win, no matter how small. I am your host, AndresPlays. Today, I share with you a conversation with Tyler Mire, composer of retro turn-based indie Quartet, about the game's brilliant core concepts, clever design process, and what makes fantasy JRPGs an endless source of wonder. Hope you enjoy.
All right. Hello, Tyler. Thank you so much for joining me today. Composer of Quartet, developer and publisher of Something Classic Games. Thank you so much for being here today. I was very happy to review and cover Quartet because it is a game that it's JRPG inspired pixel art turn-based adventure that we don't see those as often as we used to, but I was very glad to cover it and to be so surprised with everything, the writing, the music, the combats. I think it has that sauce, it has that magic. First of all, how you doing? How are things about the game and everything?
It's going well. Thanks for having me on your show. And thanks for the review and those kind words. Can't complain. The dust is sort of settling. It's been about 2 weeks since the game came out, and I'm sort of enjoying it being slower now, personally. It helped that it helped or didn't help, depending on your perspective, that Silk Song came out 9 days after Quartet, and we knew that when that game came out, it was going to kind of suck all the air out of the room. Funny thing about Hollow Knight, so our first game, Shadows of Adam, came out February 23rd of 2017. And Hollow Knight came out February 24th of 2017. And so there was this whole joke when we were about to release Quartet, and we saw there was a lot of rumors about Silk Song, and we I bet it's the day after Quartet. But it was still 9 days away, which is kind of crazy that both our games released 7 years apart, or 7 years apart from the other game, and we're within 10 days of each other. So it's kind of amusing. But no, things have been great. I'm really grateful and happy with the release, and I'm glad it's kind of slowing down. I can kind of get back to my regular family life and day job stuff, but yeah, it's been great.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is a very funny anecdote, actually. I love hearing about it. And I mean, yeah, I mean, there is still space, right, for a game like Quartet, because I remember when I got the key to cover it, it was not like it was too close to release, so I couldn't cover it the day of the embargo. But I was so eager to talk about it, and I was so happy to see how well it did with reviewers and with people. And on my account on Blue Sky, I do remember posting some screenshots, and I post about plenty of indie games, and sometimes they hit and sometimes they don't. But I remember posting about Quartet, several screenshots about the overworlds and the combat system and everything, and then I come back after a couple of hours and it has like 100 likes and shares and stuff. So I was so excited because I think that there's a place for this, like, for nostalgia, right? And it's sort of like a Trojan horse because it evokes those games, but it's most certainly like a modern game at the same time, right? I believe I mentioned something about that on my review as well. But before we go on talking more about Quartet, I love asking these questions to all developers. This question is, what video games did you grow up with?
Oh, that's a great question. So the first game I remember seeing was the original Super Mario Bros. My older siblings had it. So I was born in 1987, so I was just a little too young for Mario Bros. But my older sister and brother had an NES. And I remember seeing them play that game a lot as a little kid. My first game I probably played was probably Mario 3, which came out, I think, 89, 90. And that game blew me away. It still kind of does, honestly. And then, of course, I played the original Mario Bros., which I loved, still do, Mario 2. And then after that, it was I wanted a Super Nintendo, so my parents bought me a Sega for some reason. They probably, it's just a Nintendo, right? So I had a Sega, and I played a lot of Sonic and sports games, and I loved them. And I played, when you're a kid, you just play the games you got, and you played them all the time. That's what I did.
Yep.
And but I remember I was actually telling Pat, our writer, this story last night, because we were just sort of like reminiscing about how we got into JRPGs. And the first game that I saw that really like kind of blew me away was I had a neighbor who was my sister's age. He's about 8 years older than me. And I would just go to his house and watch him play games. And I remember walking in the room and he was playing this game on the TV. And something about it just seemed so incredible. There was like these heroes on the right side, like you casting spells and shooting crossbows and all this sorts of things. And what he was playing was Final Fantasy VI. And I remember just seeing it and being like, what is that? That looks so cool. And so that was like a big like awakening. And then eventually he went to basic training. He was in the army. And so I borrowed his PlayStation and played Final Fantasy VII and was blown away, and played Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, and then went back to all the SNES games, Chrono Trigger, FF6, FF4. That was sort of like the bug that really bit me into like, oh, I always liked games. I played a lot of games, but that was like, oh my gosh, there's like something different about them. And I think what it was just the storytelling and the epicness really appealed to me as a young kid, and that's still stuck with me. I could still remember walking in that room and seeing FF6 on the screen. It was kind of mind blowing.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's wow. What a beautiful story. And I wanted to ask. This was not scripted, but as a composer, were you also impacted by the music of Koji Kondo, right? And of course, the composers of the Final Fantasy games. Were you also like noticing all of that? Because I think a lot of people, up until a certain age, they really start to value the power of soundtracks, right? Until some years pass by, and then they're hit by that nostalgia when they listen to it. But I think that they're amazing in their own right ever since the first time you listen to them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, maybe like when I was really, really little, I just remember we kind of hear it and it would be whatever. I do remember like figuring out a way to like plug headphones into my Sega once, like the actual console, and listening to like a Sonic 2 track, and in my earphones it sounded so incredible. I remember like just being kind of blown away. But I remember like I really started thinking about that stuff when I joined the band program. I think I was 11, 12, something like that. And I immediately like wanted to start writing music. I was really fascinated. So I remember downloading like some MIDIs on the internet and running it through my little Presto MIDI and just listening and trying to pick out stuff on the keyboard. I was actually showing my kids today. There was a song I taught myself on piano. It was the Battle in the Big Bridge, FF5. This is one song I just taught myself two-handed. Like when you're a kid, you just have the patience to sit there forever. So like, yeah, like, and I still have it in my fingers like 20 years later. But yeah, I definitely noticed it. And it was interesting, Luis, because like when I went to music school way, 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 way later, I started learning more about the craft of music. All these like sounds that were in my head from those games I'd played, I was like starting to get them out in my fingers. And I remember thinking like, oh, that's what that was. This like really cool chord that Uematsu wrote. That's what, now I know what it is. And those were like big aha moments for me. And so yeah, I definitely love the music. I still love it. And I've took it in all the areas of my life. I write music professionally, but not a lot of it's video game music. But all those soundtracks and songs I heard, they're all part of everything I do. It's always going to be a part of it. So yeah, definitely loved the music as a kid. I still do. And I'm always like, love that video games feel like they just can tolerate the most diverse music possible. And that was something that really attracted me, was like Uematsu specifically. He would have, the composer for Final Fantasy, one track would just be this sweeping orchestral, beautiful piece of music. And then the next track would be like a prog rock tune. And then the next track would be like a bossa nova. It'd just be like this really wide swath of styles. And that always really attracted to me as someone that liked that music for sure.
Yes, yeah, no, it's incredible. It's incredible reading about this, and you get to see that as well in Quartet. And a question that I will ask in a few moments. It's you got jazz in Alexandria as the storyline, and then you have more classic fantasy tunes in some other instances. So I think that there's always like a dynamism to the soundtrack that I think you capture as well in that essence. But yeah. Talking a little bit before heading in into Quartet itself, the developer, as I said, developer and publisher, Something Classic. I wanted to ask, how did it start? If you could tell me.
Yeah, so Something Classic started in 2013, August 2013, so about 12 years ago. Wow. And essentially what had happened, to go back a little further before that, in the early 2000s, there was a very big hobbyist community around RPG Maker 2000. And then eventually RPG Maker 2003, which at the time were illegally translated by a Russian guy named Don Miguel, who actually follows me on Blue Sky, which is really funny. I always get a kick out of that because he was like a legend of the RPG Maker community. He was the guy. Yeah. Anyway, so when I was part of those communities in my early preteens, I met a lot of folks that ended up being the founding studio of Something Classic. The main guy was a guy named Josh Garlitz, who me and him tried to make a lot of RPG Maker games in our teens, and they were all terrible, and we never finished. But I had a real relationship with him, and we had a great vibe going on. Another guy, Tim Windorf, who ended up being the art director for Something Classic, who does the art direction for Shadows of Adam and Quartet. He was just starting pixel art at that time. And I have his pixel art from games that me and Josh were making back in 2002, 2003. It's really bad. But I was writing the music. He was trying to learn how to do pixel art. Josh was starting to learn the program. So fast forward to 2013, Josh out of the blue just randomly messaged me on Facebook. And he's like, hey, I want to make a game. You want to make a game? I was like, yeah, okay. And that's how it started. Then we found Tim. We reconnected with Tim online. And then from there, we added 2 more members, Tyler Darren, Canadian programmer, and Luke Watchholtz, who was like a legend of the RPG Maker scene. If you were around in the early thousands, you probably know Luke is the guy who made this game called The Way, which is like this really epic hobbyist RPG Maker game that people loved at the time. So that was the start of Something Classic in 2013, and we made our first game, Shadows of Adam, and that was sort of the genesis. That's a short story.
Yeah, no, and it captures it quite greatly. But it's quite interesting because, as you said, Shadows of Adam and now Quartet, you can see the pedigree, you can see the essence of the game, the DNA of what it's trying to evoke, and at the same time what it achieves on its own. And going into the next question is, as I mentioned, with games like Shadows of Adam and Quartet, you have a great lineup of turn-based RPGs that pay homage to the classics, but offer new twists, as I have been mentioning. I wanted to ask, how do you keep things fresh, right? Before starting, is there like a sort of idea board where, you kind of explore before heading into the development, or how do things work?
Yeah. So to answer the questions in the order, I think the easiest way to keep things fresh is there's a great Mark Rosewater talk. He's one of the developers of Magic. And he puts these 20 lessons of game development he's learned in his years. And he said something that really stuck with me. He said, you don't have to change a lot to change a lot. So in all our battle systems, they're pretty straightforward, but there's just one little tweak. So in SOA, it was the regenerating mana, which we brought to Quartet. And then the second thing on Quartet was the swapping. So we just add little things like that, and hopefully that makes it feel a little different and fresh enough. Other developers will take a more experimental route or more layered route. I think those are valid approaches too. I just think if we did a third game, it'd probably be the AP mana with swapping and then maybe combo attacks. So we just one little thing. But like I said, you don't have to change a lot to change a lot. And that's a big design philosophy of mine. As far as like you mentioned, planning or idea boards. Yeah, Quartet was heavily pre-produced. Me and Pat Hallman, the writer, basically for a year or 2, maybe even 3 years after Shadows of Adam come out, we just got together and just sat down and just jammed out all the high level details of Quartet. Which there were a couple pillars that we wanted in the game. And a lot of them were just random ideas I had, and he made it into a script. But mine, I was okay, I want a big cast of characters. Shadows of Adam had 4 characters. I want 8 characters in this game. So 8 characters, and I want to play these stories non-linearly. That was the second thing, and then the third thing for me was I want, when all 8 characters are together, I want you to be able to use everyone in every battle. So that was my 3 pillars, and then from there, Pat sort of kind of fused that in, and it was really useful to do that, to really own those design pillars and vision for the game. I was really proud of the game we made because we basically made exactly the game we wanted to make, with no compromises. It just took 7 years. I wish it didn't, but yeah. So I'm a big believer in pre-production, really owning your big tentpole pillars. I think those are really important, and those will kind of guide all the other decisions. You have your real pillars kind of determined, then every other decision sort of stems from that. You start seeing okay. For instance, we thought there's going to be 8 characters and you can use all of them in every battle. Well, then they have to be different mechanically. And if they're different mechanically, they should be different. The mechanics should reflect who they are as in the story. That should be synergistic, right? If we said okay, you're going to play these nonlinear stories, but every character can literally do everything the same, and they're all. But like you play Quartet, you know clearly, like in the story, in the lore of the world, they are very different how they interact with magic, and that reflects how they are in gameplay. But they had to be different in gameplay, or otherwise there'd be no reason to move in and out of the front row, right? Unless you just really like the character for their vibe or whatever, which is cool.
Yeah.
Like I know some people are just like, I just want to use Juna. I don't care if she's the best. I don't care. Like, you know, great. But you know,
Juna,
so like,
yeah, Juna the hippo.
yeah, if I'm honest. Yeah. So that was like how I see it. Like when you have these like really well honed pillars, like a lot of things sort of naturally come from those decisions. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yeah, I mean the core concepts, everything stems from that, right? As you said, you know, the story of, you know, Nikolai, this militaristic warrior, and then Ben, you know, the unlikely mage, a hero, and yeah, it's I think in that sense, I suppose they all kind of helped create the story from these core ideas. That's awesome. Probably even help, right, to stick to the concept of what character, what each character did. Um, and in that same vein, I wanted to ask, well, yeah, when did the development start? And going back to it, you know, it carves its own identity. You mentioned Final Fantasy VI, which I think it's high praise, right? Because even to this day, with so many Final Fantasy entries, people still go back to that and still believe it's the best one. So it's awesome that it evokes that feeling. So but it still carves its own identity with the world building. I think that the lore is fascinating since the very beginning. It captivated me with just a few simple lines. You know, it talks about the political intrigue, the politicization of magic, and these very like big swings that the game takes from the very beginning. So you know, you talked about these core concepts, but you know, when did the development start? How did that came to be?
Yeah. So Shadows of Adam, our first game, I think it came out, I think I said this earlier, February of 2017. And then from that point on, we did a DLC, which I think came out October that year. And after that, I was like, Omega burned out. I was like, okay. I was Pat Holloman was not a part of Shadows of Adam, but we had connected because I had met him, or I found out about him through his academic reverse design books on game design. He had a website, he had a book on Chrono Trigger and FF6, which I read religiously and helped me a lot. And I was just emailing him, and we were like, hey, we should make a game together. And he was really into it because he had been like searching his whole life to find people who were as into it as I was, because he was never a part of like an RPG maker community like I was, unfortunately. But I said, look, man, I'm just a little burnt out. But I think by the beginning of 2018, maybe the end of 2017, I was like, all right, we can start talking about this next game. So we started talking about it, and that's when we sort of had like that 2-year pre-production. It probably wasn't until late 2019, maybe early 2020, that we really started making Quartet. That's when we brought in our programmer, Peter Rubel, who was one of the finest programmers in the business, and Tyler Darren, who also worked on Shadows of Adam. And that's when we really started. And we did our Kickstarter, I think, in 2021. Yeah. So, you know, it's like I say, it took 7 years, but like if you count like actually when you start making the game, probably more like 5. It's still not great. 6. Yeah. But you know, but yeah, I would say probably started pre-production in 2018, really started making the game in 2020. Because when we did that Kickstarter, and we knew for Kickstarter we needed like a vertical slice demo. So we made that, and that helped us like hone all the systems, make sure the concept was working. And yeah, from then on, like we had the script. Pat made asset lists. So once we got the money from Kickstarter, we just got all the graphics we needed, and it was just like straight ahead, like, okay, here's the game we got to make. Let's just make it. Making JRPGs is very, very hard.
Yeah.
A lot of content, and a lot of it's bespoke. So that's what makes it very specifically challenging, because, you know, like there's some cutscenes in chapter 10 that are very elaborate with the staging and the coordination with the music and all the animations. Like some of those cutscenes took like a month to make. Like it takes a lot of time. Yeah. And then you can't reuse any of it. You know, you can't reuse a cutscene, right?
Of course.
So
yeah. I was quite impressed, as I said from the very beginning. I think it was Cordelia's campaign when she's fighting on the train, and then it's this moving scenario, right, when you can see the the mountains and the desert and everything. I think that it's captivating. It was a really great idea. And going into the question about the art style, and the character sprites as well, I think they're all quite distinct. How do you achieve that aesthetic?
Well, so when we work with Tim Windorf, who's the art director for Shazam and a Quartet as well, basically Pat, like I got a really hand Pat. He was like the keeper of the vision as far as story and characters. He had like a really well-defined idea of who the characters were and what they would look like. So when we met with Tim, we said, okay, we want sprites like these many pixels tall, a little bit bigger than SOAs, maybe more like FF6. And basically for every character, he had like kind of a mood board of sorts. Like this is who the character is, and she would kind of look like Cordelia would kind of look like wearing this person, like how the clothes are with this kind of hair. So it's like very thorough. And then Tim just did his magic, and that's sort of how that worked out. The one thing I will take sort of credit for is like I had very little input in the story or the direction other than like really vague dumb ideas. Like I just remember telling him like I want a robot character and I want like an animal character. That was like my contribution. So he had to figure out how to make that work. I technically Zikaron's not a robot. He's like a golem, but he's essentially a robot.
Yeah, I do like him, by the way. I think it's these type of quirky characters, right, that are not humans, that sort of add some uniqueness to the story and to the party as well, right? It's not all just humans with this huge plights that they're struggling with. You know, some of these characters are just quirky and fun, and maybe they have, you know, mysterious backgrounds, but they're just fun, you know.
Yeah.
Or as June, as you said, I think what I wanted to ask as well, but you were so going in depth about the development that I said maybe I won't ask this, but I think it's a good question. Like, who is your favorite character? Like you as part of the team.
I don't. I think I like. I mean, they're all kind of my babies, so it's hard to pick. But I really do. I like Ben a lot. He feels kind of relatable and grounded, even if he is kind of a little aloof and a little nonchalant at times, which definitely drives people like Cordelia crazy, who's just the opposite of that. Ben's definitely up there for me. I quite like Alexandra. I think her arc's fun because she kind of, I mean, I think about it from her perspective. You know, she gets in this party and she's surrounded by a war-worn sergeant, like an incredible mage scholar, Cordelia, like a doctor, Jerome, Ben, who's just this like idiot savant, and Agatha, who's like an Amazonian goddess, essentially. And she's just like this 19-year-old shop girl. So like from her perspective, she's like, wow, what am I doing here? So I quite like that fish out of water sort of energy. And those characters have a lot of room to grow for sure. So probably like, yeah, Ben, Alex, and I guess I'll throw Nikolai in there too, because I have a fondness for his, like, you know, he's a sergeant. Like this is the job. Let's just do it. This is what we got to do. Kind of a blue collar kind of mentality. And I like that aspect of the story. I mean, all the characters are a lot of fun. Juna's funny. She has some funny, like, kind of quippy one-liners. She kind of reminds me of like a Brooklyn waitress. Like, oh, honey, you need to dump him. You know, like she kind of has that kind of energy sometimes. It's kind of fun. But
that's a great reference. Yeah, I can see it.
She likes to gossip.
Yeah, and it's great, as you mentioned, Nikolai, for example. Since the very first few moments, right, when he goes to his hometown and people react to him, oh, you're this, you know, big boots sergeant, and you know, you're not even gonna look us in the eye any longer, and you're just gonna be this completely different person. And you can see that all of these is weighing on him, and of course his arc as it develops, it's as you said, they have a lot of room to grow. And I think Ben is also, I started with Ben's story, right, not knowing what to expect with any one of the stories there. I think they're all each unique and intriguing in that regard. But to start with Ben's story was quite funny because I think that the writing excels all throughout the story. You know, all of the characters are well developed. But starting with Ben, I was also thinking, like, what's up with this guy? Like he has this, you know, this unique blessing, right? Like he's kind of like the luminary from Dragon Quest, and he's just shrugging it off like nothing.
That's a good analogy, the luminary. Yeah, I think it's funny because, like, I know a lot of people who did start with Ben too, and they're like, wait, is this a comedy game? Like, is this like a joke? Like, because if you play depending on what chapter you start on, it can really color how you might feel the whole game is. Like, yeah, Ben's is definitely like, I mean, it's definitely a comedic chapter, but I think it has a lot of heart at the end
Mm,
where he kind of reveals his backstory to Agatha. But yeah, like I did an interview like right before the game had come out, and the two hosts had one had played Ben's chapter, and
mm,
one had played I think Nikolai's chapter, and so they just had like and that's all they played, and so they just had like a completely different perception of what the game was, and I found that quite amusing.
hmm
So yeah,
Yeah, I can definitely see that happening because yeah, all of these stories have a very distinct flavor in the very beginning. Of course, then they merge and there's like an overarching plot that kind of makes it all mesh together quite well. But in the beginning, it's an idea of, well, what am I gonna be thrown into now? I think there's an excitement into not knowing what's gonna happen there.
yeah,
Um, yeah.
yeah. That was a big risk we took with the story structure too. Like that was one like huge worry I had before the game came out. I was like, um, it's very risky to basically have 4 new games
Mm.
in a row. Like if the characters of the story really aren't working for people, it's gonna be hard to get them like they want to see. So that was the biggest risk that we took, I think, structurally was like, okay, we're gonna like really take our time with these intro chapters to really let you get to know the characters, and hopefully it pays off. And that's for the player to decide if they like that or not.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you just put it out there, and make your best effort, which I believe it definitely resonated according to the many reviews that you have now. So congrats on that. I wanted to mention as well, you as the composer, I believe you can give me a great answer on this. The music is great. I believe that you're the second composer that I have on. The first one was Alpha Cromieyo from Promise Mascot Agency, another great game. But I as a reviewer, I've reviewed about 85 games now, and I always, if the music is great, if the music engrosses me, I make sure to make a note about it, write a paragraph, and that's something that you usually do not see in any video game reviews. Maybe just a passing comment, and that's it. And I think that since the beginning of Quartet, that music in the main menu kind of sets the stage for what's to come. As we mentioned a moment ago, Alexandria with the jazz in the small town, and the other fantasy tunes that were reminiscent of Final Fantasy VI, we must say, which I'm sure you must feel delighted to be compared, as you said, to
Of
Nobuo
course.
Uematsu. But yes, how did the production of the soundtrack come about, and what is your favorite track as well?
Yeah, production. I mean, so like Pat had the vision for the story and the places that the story was going to take you and the themes that we needed. So there was just a big list of like, okay, these are the themes we need, these are locations with like pretty good explanations of it. And so I just sort of just kind of as I could just started knocking out some stuff. And then as game production went along and I could actually start walking in the areas, it was a little more helpful to like get that experience to help the music. One thing
Mhm,
that's a little inside baseball that the player doesn't need to know this, but I did it and it's interesting to me. It's hard
mhm,
to quite explain, but essentially in the 4 early chapters, there are 12 keys. I mean,
mhm,
in Western music, there's 12 key centers, and because there's 4 chapters, I basically just divided each chapter in let's see how many, three of the 4, 3 of the 12, yeah, so every chapter was only in 3 of the 4, so like that was like a self-imposed challenge for myself. So like I
mhm,
think Cordelia's is all like in D flat and G flat and stuff like that, so that was like a little weird little quirk that I did. And then if you like visit areas from those people's chapters later in the game, or it's a theme associated with a character from their country or whatever, then I would
mhm.
stick with those keys, which is like an interesting constraint that no one will never notice, but I just wanted to put it out there because for some reason, like 7 years in, I was like diligently sticking to this concept. Like it was kind of dumb, but I did it. It's um, but yeah, I mean, I've always just tried to like I'm a trained jazz musician. That's actually my background.
Wow.
So it was great to have a setting like Alexandra's where I felt like it felt normal to do.
Mhm,
Because Pat basically described where she was from as like early 20th century Paris or something like that.
mhm,
Um, and I was like, okay, I could see jazz like working for this. And so I went in that direction, and I was really grateful that a lot of people seemed to like it. Um, And then like for Cordelia's chapter, she kind of goes to the Wild West. That was a lot of fun because I'm a huge fan of like Morricone, the Italian composer who
Oh
did
my
the
god,
score. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And we all know that. And of course, Wild Arms is like all about the pastiches of Morricone. But like I was like,
Yeah.
you gonna do West, you gotta lean into those tropes a little bit. That was a lot of fun. I did a little whistling on some tracks. I had another friend
Wow.
of mine whistle. Uh, had friends like recording percussion, like shakers, like rattlesnake shakers, and stuff, all the sorts of fun stuff.
Hmm.
Um, as far as favorite track, it's hard to say. I was quite happy with the there's a barbershop tune in Alexander's chapter that's kind of like in a hidden, not a hidden area, but kind of like a not a required area. And
Mm.
I was pretty proud of that because I had never written barbershop quartet music before. And there was this like running joke every time anyone saw the title of Quartet, said, "Oh, is there a barbershop quartet?" And so like
Yeah.
that was like in my head, and I got really into barbershop, and I was like, let me just try to write one. And I wrote one piece, and I hired a guy, and he sang it great. And then I like secretly, without telling the dev team, like paid one of our artists, like, hey Tony, can you make me like sprites of 4 singers like wearing the like traditional like a pinstripe with the hat,
Yeah.
and he did it, and had given like a little three frame animation to look like they're singing. And I did that, and I was like, I'm just gonna sneak this in the game and see if anyone notices. So I was proud of that one. It's a little indulgent. That was definitely one for me. Um,
Yeah.
but I got a kick out of it when the game did come out. There were a lot of blue sky and Twitter posts of people just, what the heck is this? And posting a picture of it. I was like, okay, that was the reaction I was hoping for.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that in the game itself, just little details, little secrets like that one, just every time going off the beaten path, you are always rewarded. And I love when they do that, right? Like the famous, behind the waterfall treasure. There's always certain, even in the beginning, even before you have the whole party together, the game tells you exactly where to go, right? Go northeast, southwest, whatever. But then you're like, well, what if I go to this area? And then that also informs the world. um and as you said, like, didn't know that you sneaked that in, and that must have been fantastic, seeing, as you said, the reactions of people finding out about it. Talking about the dialogue and the world building as well, as I mentioned, I think that the dialogue does a very effective job. Each one of the 4 main chapters in the beginning, before it all gets together, they're not that long, right? I think they're about 2 hours, less than 2 hours, right? If you're quite diligent about it. But I think that you start piecing every part of the world together, right? As you said, they come from different countries, they come from different backgrounds, and you start learning that magic is a very incendiary topic, in each and every one of these characters' lives, and in the world itself. So I think that's fantastic. There's also a lot of puns and comedy as well. It's interesting that you mentioned that you didn't want people to think that it was a comedy game, because I know, when you mentioned that, I remember playing over the years, right, JRPGs or JRPG inspired games, like Quartet, but that kind of leaning a little bit too much and
Yeah.
poking fun at the genre, which,
Yeah.
it's, if they want to do it that way, it's fine. But I really love that Quartet does take itself seriously, right? For the most part, right? It pokes fun at itself and the genre in some instances, but overall, the plot is quite serious. As I said, there's political assassinations and war and whatnot. So, how did you achieve this level of writing?
Yeah. Yeah. We definitely wanted a game that was like pretty sincere and not like a meta commentary on JRPGs. Like that's
Mm.
that was like kind of a real rich style of JRPG, especially in the indie community, especially in the early 2000s. Like Zeboyd comes to mind, the Cthulhu Saves the World games, really hilarious. And
Yeah.
that was like Robert Boyd's like real specialty, is that style of humor. We definitely didn't want to do that per se. Like you mentioned, there's comedy. Ben's a funny character, but it's sort of like the situation is funny and the dialogue is funny, rather than like, haha, we're in an RPG. Like we didn't
Mhm.
want to do too much of that. As far as the writing, I mean, Pat Holloman, our writer, I really just got to sing his praise as much as I can. He's just kind of put in the work. I think I was talking to him about, because you had sent me the questions earlier. I was talking to him about what he might want me to say. And he said, like, I was like,
Mhm.
so he basically said, like, the way I learned to write is just, I just read a lot of books, and then I just would practice writing. He wrote 6 books of game design,
Mm.
And he said he got a lot better at writing doing that. He got a lot of like really hard criticism and feedback from colleagues that he trusted, and he just kept writing and kept reading. He said like, Pat really inspires me because as a composer, like I'm just always trying to get better at my craft, be a more expressive artist, be like better at communicating the emotion to the layperson, right? Because that's what I feel like art is. Like that's why you learn art is to like, well, one, it's just self-fulfilling, but
Mhm.
also like I want to be the best composer. I want to know the most craft so I can make people feel emotion. And I
Mhm.
think that's what Pat wants in his writing. And he really inspires me because like he just does the work. He reads all the time. He's constantly reading. He'll tell me like, man, like the difference between like a great book and a mediocre book is like at a scale of like 1,000. Like when you read a great book, it just makes all mediocre books just seem, you know what I mean? I think about
Yeah.
that sometimes with music. Like, so he just reads a lot. You know, he consumes a lot of media. He watches a lot of TV, film. He tries to anime. You know, just try to keep things diverse. And I think like when I think about like a lot of earlier video game stories, a lot of those develop and composers to some extent,
Mhm.
a lot of those creators were very influenced by so many different things.
Mhm.
Like the creators of Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, they were watching Western movies. They were reading books. They obviously loved D&D, which was from
Mhm.
the West. And they had all these like really disparate influences. And that's why I think the JRPG genre felt so fresh and different. It's like this colliding of all these ideas and media consumptions from all over the world. Whereas now I think sometimes it's very easy. Like, I want to make a JRPG. I mean, the only thing I'm going to take to this JRPG is other JRPG stories I played, right?
Mhm.
Like, you should remember that, like, those artists didn't just consume other JRPGs or other anime. They were also reading books and watching movies and D&D, right? So I think
Mhm.
that can make things feel fresh. That's not quite what you asked me, but a little tangent.
No, no, it's absolutely fine. And one of the people that developers that I interviewed earlier, his name is Danny Waitson. He wrote the dialogues of Harold Halibut, another very heartfelt game, very passionate, very sincere story as well. And I'm glad that you mentioned that word sincere, because I believe that that really shines through in Quartet, right? Even though it's not this high-end, graphically intensive game, you can see in the writing Cordelia fighting or being confronted with corruption, and just having to face with the realities of the world and being sort of naive but still trying to chip in and do good for herself and for the world around her. So I think that there are some very poignant moments in the game. And what you mentioned about video games as art, I saw today on social media that it was National Video Game Day. I mean, I don't know in which country, right? But whatever. Like I saw some very beautiful posts and renditions about how video games help them in their lives, right? I mean, for example, me when I was much younger, JRPGs helped me escape, and Ben's story, for example, really reminded me of like, wow, I wish, like, if I was playing this as a kid, I wish I was that guy, right, who just suddenly has this ability to create magic, right, to use magic. And I don't know, it's just there's something fantastical about them. And in about your last points, this writer Danny Waitson also mentions that, like, you have to, as video game writers, of course, I cannot like criticize them outright, but there's something to be said about writing in gaming, right? And you can
Yeah.
see the writing in gaming that is more elevated is because they're made from people that really engage with more media overall.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think that just makes like your art richer. It's something I think about a lot. Like a lot of things like like will seem so original and fresh, but when you really like know the sources, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, that's just that and that. Like I always think about Star Wars. Like Star Wars, like this when it, IP that came out in the 70s was like so fresh and felt so new and novel. When we really think about it, George Lucas was using World War II, Greek mythology tropes, and like old serial movies. So like you combine all those together and it makes this really fresh, very new kind of thing. Um there's a lot of really, I mean, another thing with Patrick is that he's obviously a really good scholar of history. Like I think if you just know even the basics of modern Western history, there's not super subtle some of the historical references for the Austin Army and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
one thing that makes JRPGs kind of fun though is that like because JRPGs are generally a fantasy genre, magic is just like this great metaphor, right? You
Mm-hmm.
can kind of take all the politics and all these conflicts of humanity, things that happen in real life, and you just put magic, and it suddenly feels like a JRPG, right? I think that's really cool. And a lot of times, like we didn't really get this criticism per se, but like we were like wondering like if someone like would see how a villain or character would act, like that doesn't seem like something people would do, and be like, people did these things, like real people did these things to other people not that long ago. So that can also, I think, make things feel resonant, I guess, because like these are things humans do. But what makes it fantastical is just the magic part of it, right? Obviously, we don't have magic in real life. I can't shoot fireballs or whatever. I wish I could. That'd be kind of cool. Yeah, that's another thing maybe that people could think about, I guess. I'm not a writer. I have kind of terrible prose. I'm not gonna lie. So I'm not going to pretend to talk with any expertise. I'm just kind of parroting what Pat has told me.
Yeah, I mean, but that's fine. You're an excellent musician. You're a great musician, and composer. So that's fine. I keep thinking about what you said about the keys. That's just brilliant. But anyway, moving on. Something that I found out about in a review that someone else wrote. I think it was from a website called Dear Gamers. They mentioned in the review that the Oxford comma toggle had about 17 upvotes on Reddit, and it created this whole debate, right? Like, how do you guys think this came to happen, right? Like, how many debates do you think the developers had? So I ask to you now, how did the Oxford comma toggle happen?
Yeah, so PC Gamer actually did an article on this because they emailed us the same question. But the long and short of it is, Peter, our programmer, I think one night was like, "Hey, should this like have a comma here, Pat? Because like one time, one scene it had a comma and one it did." And Pat was like, "Well, actually, no, this is right." And then it was like this whole thing. And so Pete was like, "I'll just make an option for the Oxford comma." And he said this, he maybe said this to us, and they're like, "Okay, sure, why not? Whatever, man. We got to do other things." And so one day it was just in the game, and I thought, oh, that's kind of funny. Peter's this weird, quirky guy. He has an Oxford comma. Who cares? Whatever. Does it work? Okay. There's like 7 Oxford commas in the game. Whatever. And then like one day on Reddit, like there's this like post that has like tens of thousands of people liking and commenting on it about the about the option. And I was like, wow, this is kind of funny. So that's all credit to Peter for having the meme-tastic vision that he did. It got us like that, like 5 seconds of virality on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as I said, you never know what's going to resonate. Of course, I had never seen, and I suppose a lot of other people had not seen an Oxford comma toggle before in their lives. So it is indeed kind of funny, but it's also so interesting, right? As you mentioned, that was what, made you go viral for a second. Of course, whenever I see people, whenever I post about a Quartet, and I'm sure I will keep on posting about it, there's people that have these accounts that are just dedicated to nostalgia, right? And then when they see this art style, they're captivated by it. They're like, well, what is this, right? And I saw people that hadn't usually engaged with me, because I usually cover somewhat artistic indie games, right? And Quartet is very much a retro indie JRPG, right? But it's really great because as soon as you see it, it evokes that feeling, and then you play it, and it's warranted, still, and at the same time doing its own thing. So just to finish, and thank you so much for your time, Tyler. How pleased are you? How surprised were you about the reception of Quartets, and what are the future plans of something classic? I believe you have My Familiar coming out.
I mean, I've been really happy and grateful for our release. You work on something for so long, and like I had mentioned earlier, we kind of had the vision of the game. We just had to kind of piece it together. But there's always that doubt, like, we were really focused. We didn't pivot hard. We wanted to be focused, like really believe in the product we were making. But it's just hard to know if that's going to resonate with people. We had testers play through it, and they all seem to really enjoy it. But they're you're thinking in your mind like they're just being sycophantic. Who knows? And so when I sent it out to reviewers, I really was like unable to sleep that night before the embargo lifted. I was like, I'm gonna wake up and it's over. Like, no, well, worst case, no one's gonna review it. Second worst case is everyone reviews it and they hate it. And then when I saw all the reviews go up, I was just really, really overjoyed with the reception. And then the game came out and it sold a lot better than our first game. So I'm just really grateful. And We got a lot of great feedback. People have helped us get out the first update with some improvements. So I've just been really grateful. There's folks who don't like the game, and that's totally fine. It's
Mm-hmm.
totally valid. I'm just glad that people have chosen to engage with the game, even if
Mm-hmm.
they, passionately don't like stuff. Hey, that's cool. You still gave us $20 and that's cool. Like, you had a feeling about the game. That's cool. Not
Mm-hmm.
everything is for everyone. And but yeah, I'm
Indeed.
really, really proud of it. I'm really grateful. As far as plans after this, I personally am just kind of cool, like, to just chill for a little bit as far as making a new game. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure what the future of that would be for me. I mean, I've basically did 2 big JRPG games since 2013, which took a lot out of me.
Mm-hmm.
And the market has changed a lot. And there were some instances of how Quartet was received that kind of blindsided me as far as what the market wanted. That really surprised me, and just kind of like, man, I'm like kind of out of touch.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of shocking. Uh, but as far as you mentioned, My Familiar is a game that's being developed by a lot of Something Classic folks.
Mm-hmm.
I work as composer for that game, and I'm really excited for that game. And I think when it comes out, people are going to really like it. But as far as like producing my own game, not sure, if I'm being
Mm-hmm.
completely honest. I've been telling people for like the last 2 years, I'm never making a game again. I'm over this. I'm done. I hate it. I'm done. And then, probably a year from now, I'll be like, what if we just took Quartet's code and just added combos? And then I'll
Yeah.
be doing a Kickstarter, and then we'll be making the next game.
Yeah.
Who knows? But right now, I'm just trying to relax, spend time with my family, interact with folks, do these podcasts, which are a lot of fun, and all that good stuff.
Of course, yeah. Last episode of this podcast, we talked a little bit about burnout. So yeah, take your time to relax and enjoy life, of course. And yeah, I saw the updates of the turbo mode, which honestly is not really that necessary because the combat itself is quite fast paced.
Yeah.
And I've toggled, I've turned it on, and the fights are, I don't know how many seconds can you like save by turning it on, but I mean, I know some people really want things to move along rather quickly, so I'm glad that you added that, for being receptive to folks' feedback. And of course, as you said, right now the industry is in a strange position. I mean, I started writing in 2023, but I've written about games all my life, and sometimes you think a game's going to do well, and it sort of does, but then the people just don't see, like that. Certain games don't seem to find their right audience. So I'm really, really glad that the Quartet has found some of its audience. I believe that there's still people that need to find out about this game. So that's, why we're doing this interview, why I'm trying to promote it even more. And then you'll have console releases soon as well. So I'm sure that I will be talking more about that as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate you helping spotlight it and taking time to do the review and this interview. Yeah, it helps. I mean, it helps a lot. Like, it's like a real blue collar, like grassroots kind of thing. These indie games, I'm not trying to say, all I'll say about Something Classic is we're like a true indie studio. We have no outside publishing money. We self fund / fundraise everything. We work with contractors. We pay out of our own pockets. So it's really been a hard scrabble, like, indie thing. But yeah, to your point with the consoles, I think consoles, I'm expecting to help get us a kind of a second wind, and then eventual DLC, which we promised for our Kickstarter backers, which I think will help. That's basically what we did with our first game, Chaz Vadim. It's kind of funny because it came out in 2017, and we didn't release the Switchboard until 2019, 2 years after the game had come out, and even then it still sold quite well. And then so I'm really excited to get these console ports. I know a lot of folks are like, I just not a Steam player. I really want it on Switch and PlayStation. So hang tight, y'all. We're working on it, I promise. And but yeah, this has been great, man. And I'm really I just want to thank everyone who's played the game, who's bothered to review it, to let us know your thoughts. It helps a lot. And to any other developers who are listening, I guess the second thing I would say is just don't read every comment. Maybe
Yes.
today I was like, you know what? I started reading this essay about the game, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go outside with my kids.
Yeah.
Just, kick the soccer ball a little bit.
Yeah,
I don't need to read this.
You got to take care of your mental health, absolutely. And something that's kind of funny that you mentioned about people that don't play Steam, I literally just got a gaming laptop, right, for the first time in my life. And it's really funny that the first game that I get to review is Quartet, right? Like
Yeah.
a retro style JRPG. Which I think that it's also quite fitting, because for me, at least, my approach to video games when I was very young was with JRPGs. I started playing JRPGs. I didn't start with platformers or puzzlers or any other type of games until much long after. I'm from Mexico, I speak Spanish, so one of the main reasons that I speak English is because these games are quite text heavy, and I wanted to know what they were saying, right? I wanted to follow the story, and I wanted to be a part of those universes with magic and fantasy. And again, I believe Quartet really capture that vibe, and it really evokes those feelings. So congrats again, and thank you for making the time to talk with me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And I hear that story a lot, Luis, from folks from Mexico, Central and South America. I've heard this story so many times. A lot of people from Colombia, Brazil that I know, there's a lot of game developers from those countries. They say, "Hey, I learned English because I got Final Fantasy IV." I'm like, that's incredible. I have a friend from Quebec. Same thing. He said, "I mostly learned English from just playing RPGs." Now it makes me regret that there weren't Spanish RPGs, that are games in Spanish, because I grew up in Texas, and speaking Spanish would have been kind of useful, but alas.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. Hopefully Quartet does inspire more people, to learn English as well and help them in their lives. But yeah, anyway, thank you so much, Tyler, for making the time. And yeah, go play Quartet.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much to Tyler for his time and insights, and to you for listening to this wonderful conversation. Little Victories now has a Discord server where we celebrate our small wins, daily lives, and media we like. And you're invited. So please look at the podcast description for the invitation to join our chill space. If you like this episode, please consider sharing and subscribing, as there is yet more to come soon. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next one.